right in the middle of a series called Family. And when you're teaching on family, you better be ready to go down a long road because there's a lot to family. Family's complicated. Family's wonderful, but it's wonderfully difficult. And great families that do great things have great difficulty. And if somebody tells you something different, they just haven't really ever had a family, now have they? And today, the topic we're looking at is very particular. And I have a feeling it's something that all of us will be able to relate to. In fact, I know that we will, because the title today is just called Family Conflict. Isn't that fun? Family conflict. Here's a question. How many of you have ever actually had a family? You see your hands if you had a family. Okay, some of you really aren't with us now yet. How many of you have ever had family conflict? Can I see your hands if you've ever had? Yeah, okay, so you can look around and see that this is pretty much a message that all of us can get a hold of some part of here, okay? Because if you're living and breathing, then you got a family somewhere, unless we have missed something along the way. And family, more than any other structure on the face of the earth, faces challenges that are at best difficult and at worst can destroy each other. Maybe one of the only things that we all have in common for sure is this: we all fuss and we all fight with family. And even if you win an argument with family, even if you win, you really haven't won anything. If you win an argument, we're going to go over personality types in just a second. You're going to see where you fit in. You may not even be on our list, but I think you probably will be. But I'm going to be on that list as the litigator. Okay, I'm the guy who litigates. I'm the guy who I can argue. I can spin a web of words and spin everybody around, and they'll leave the room going, "What did he say? I mean, I think I know I think he proved a point, but what was the point?" You can win an argument with family and accomplish nothing. You know, out in the world, it's different. When you're at work, if you have an argument and you win it, okay, we give. You won. At school, other places, you can argue and you can make your point, but at family, you can make a valid point, and it won't make any difference. You won't win any favor. We don't process conflict the same way in our families that we do outside of our families. We just don't. There's a whole different set of issues with family that there are outside of families. We're going to look at some different types of personalities. Number one, we have the peacemaker. Every family has a peacemaker. All right, there's a picture right here of what it looks like to be at peace. This is peaceful. This is what peacemakers want the family to look like. All right, I have one of those in my family. I aren't it. All right, and I won't say who she is, but she's the peacemaker. And the peacemaker will do everything, make every attempt. They will bend over backwards. They'll run out of anything to make peace. Just peace at all cost. And peacemakers are important, but you don't want them in charge of your nation, because whoever's trying to take over your nation will take over your nation. It's good to have a peacemaker in the mix helping make decisions. Peacemakers, very important. But peacemakers have a way of doing things, and usually that is just get out of it. Can we just get out of it? Let's not argue. Let's not bicker. Let's not fight. Second, we have the sulkers. The sulkers. I don't know, I would ask you if you're a sulker. But we have a picture of it. See, there's a sulker. This gives you what it looks like. If sulking, some people sulk privately. They go off alone. They say, there's a sulker. I'm not sure actually what that is, but it's something frightening. But yeah, sulkers. Sad, they get angry, they want to just crawl off. Sulker. Some sulking starts at a very young age. Kids sulking. If you're a sulker, you don't really work at accomplishing something. You just feel bad. And you go off to feel bad, or you'll let other people know that you feel bad. Then there's the stuffers. People that stuff it all down inside. They push it down. Just push it down because this is a guy who stuffed it too long. And now it's coming out. Because see, what's true about stuffers is, stuffers will stuff it down. That's a stuffer. Early stuffer. They'll stuff it down until there's nowhere else for it to go. And you know what happens with stuffers? It will come out. And it will explode. And it will explode at a bad time in front of usually the people that are closest to you. And stuffers can't really achieve much. They just want to, again, they're a lot like peacemakers, except it builds up inside of them. They're stuffers. Then there's litigators. I mentioned litigator a minute ago. I am a litigator. Those are people they just want to keep talking. Can we just keep talking? And the peacemaker just wants to walk away. They're done, but the litigator insists, no, let's keep talking. It's like in front of a jury. This kid's going to be a litigator someday. He's talking to the cat. And litigators just don't want to give up. And here's the thing, if you're a litigator, if you're somebody who needs to convince other people what's true, you are the gifted communicator. You're the one that everybody just says, do we have to start now? Because once you wind him up, he's not going to shut up until he thinks he's done. And that could be hours. And with litigators in your family, we don't get much done. We can say a lot. We can convince you. You can even get them all to agree, yes, you're right, but we don't care. Litigators. And then lastly, we have the screamers. The screamers. This is a personality type. Now, some of you grew up with screamers. Screamers? Anybody ever watch Seinfeld? I mean, maybe it's just a few of us. Remember George Costanza? Remember his parents? It's very bad to have two screamers in one family. But they were both screamers. I don't even know their names. Mr. and Mrs. Canstanza was their name. But they were screamers. The thing about screamers, almost always, a screamer had a screamer growing up in their family. They had a mom or a dad who was a screamer. And screamers their shoes is shorter, and it's just a very short distance between calmness and talking loud and then screaming. And the interesting thing is about this, most screamers marry non-screamers. We tend to marry opposites, and almost never will you find a screamer that will link up with and fall in love with a non-screamer. They tend to marry opposites. My dad had a gift. He could raise his voice to some kind of a decibel. I'm not sure exactly where it was on the scale of decibels, but neighbors could hear it, and it would do something to your earlobe that would never be the same, and it would just unsettle your spirit and knot you up. He could just make that happen, and if you were raised in a family with screamers, you may be a screamer. It may be hard for you not to just shout things. And here's the thing, if you married somebody who's not a screamer, they don't understand you at all. If you married into a family that they're calm when they talk about things, they talk it through, if you suddenly launch as a screamer, your spouse doesn't get you at all. Devil, come out! Because they don't know. They thought you were okay, and now you've gone off the deep end. And screamers, and you have all these different personality types in a family. And therefore, when you have conflict, it's complicated. It's complicated. It's difficult. And sometimes it's easier in fact, you know what? It's always easier just to walk away from than to fix it. But if we walk away, we dare not walk away. We must be able to engage at some point. Maybe there needs to be a stepping back period, but there needs to be a re-engagement so we can find resolve. So we can find answers. As long as there's family, there's going to be conflict. And that's the way of it. As long as there's personalities, as long as you woke up breathing this morning, there's going to be some conflict in your future with some family member. That's the way of it. So today, we're going to look at the idea, and this is a concept that's raised up from a guy in the Bible who's teaching, and it's a concept that you're going to want to push back on. You're going to want to argue with and say, I don't think that's true. But the conflict is, the idea is this, there's really only one source of conflict. That's what he's saying. That's the premise for this message. There's really only one source of conflict. We would argue with that when it comes to our family members and say, no, there's lots of sources. There's lots of issues. There's lots of attitude. There's lots of looks on the face. There's all this stuff goes into the mix. And this writer would say, no, there's only one source of the conflict. One thing that if we could change, one thing that if we could address properly with ourselves, it would change. It would change our families and it would change our future. And my goodness, it'll change their futures too. It'll teach them a way of communicating that they didn't know before. So for that, we're going to look to James, the brother of Jesus. James, the brother of Jesus. We're going to look in James chapter 4, starting in verse 1. We're going to be reading from the NIV. If you want to look that up in your Bibles, it's going to be up on the screen if you don't have one with you. Or if you have a translation that's so different that it's more of a distraction, we'll have it up here. But James 4, chapter 1. And James, the brother of Jesus now, who heard all the things Jesus had to say, started with this one question. And it's a question that we should all answer today. What causes fights and quarrels among you? That's the question he starts with. Now, if I were to ask you to turn to the person you came with today and just discuss among yourself and your family what really causes the fights and quarrels among you. You want to know what would happen in about 5 minutes if I let you go? There would be fights and quarrels among us. Because we don't agree on why that's why there are fights and quarrels. We can't come to we are pretty sure it's not us. We're pretty sure that it's somebody else. And James starts off saying, what causes fights and quarrels among you? And we immediately, as I said, if I asked you to discuss it, we would turn to blaming somebody else, wouldn't we? Otherwise, we would be able to fix it ourselves. If we thought it was our issue, we would work on it and maybe even fix it. But when we argue and bicker, we automatically go to blaming somebody else. And I want to give you a quote today. You may want to write down, because this is profound and this is true. And here it is. As long as you blame others for your unhappiness, as long as you blame others for your unhappiness, you will always be unhappy. As long as you blame others for your unhappiness, you will always be unhappy. Now, I learned this years ago. So you would think that there's no quarreling in my family. You would think that we got this one down. I mean, come on. If the dad, if the husband, if the guy who's supposed to be kind of the head of the family and the leader of the family, which is kind of a misnomer in our family because my wife's a lot smarter than I am. But the truth is, I'm supposed to be the leader, and I try to do that. And if I've got this thing down that if as long as I'm willing to blame others, then I'll never be happy, then that must mean I must be willing to deal with it myself. The problem is I forget this. And I think that other things need to happen so I can be happy. Attitudes should be adjusted so I can be happy. And as long as you blame others for your unhappiness, anything about others for your unhappiness, you will always be unhappy. Did you know every time you do this, every time you blame somebody else for your unhappiness, you take your happiness, let's say it's right there, you take your happiness and you put it in the hands of the person that you're in conflict with? Every time you say, she's the reason I'm unhappy, that phrase you said, the word you said, the look on your face, that's the reason I'm unhappy. Every time you do that, you hand your happiness off to the person that you're in conflict with. I can't be happy unless you allow me to be happy. That's what you say. I can't be happy unless you allow me to be happy. And how will you allow me to be happy? By doing the thing that I'm demanding of you right now. By having attitude I'm expecting of you right now. By acquiescing to my demands, then I can be happy. And when you do it, you put your happiness in the hands of this person. Whether you love them or not, whether they're a friend or not, your happiness is now in their hands. And if I were to ask you today, how many of you feel good about letting your happiness be contingent on somebody else doing the right thing? You would say, no, it's just a bad idea. But you do it. You do it. Husbands do it because the wife says the wrong thing. And she shouldn't have said it. And it was mean, and it was unkind, and it was unthoughtful. But we give that person the power over us because they say things that make us mad. And wives do it because he's just so mean and he's not listening to me. He's not hearing my heart. And he doesn't understand me, and he doesn't even try. And she gives him her happiness. Students do it. Oh, you want to know why I act crazy sometime? Because I'm a kid. I'm a kid and I deserve to act unhappy sometime. And besides, you're not letting me do what I want to do. You give a parent, sometimes parents can be unreasonable. Can you imagine that? Sometimes parents can be unreasonable. Sometimes parents can be just right, but say it the wrong way. Sometimes parents are dead on and you don't like what they're saying. And you're giving your parent your happiness. And you are not taking responsibility. And you're going to have to someday. This whole American thing that if you're below a certain age, you're not responsible. The consequences are still there for your behavior. They may stay with you the rest of your life because as a young person, you didn't decide, I'm done with that. I'm done with that. I'm going to grow up. I'm going to change. What causes fights and quarrels among you? As long as you are caught up in this cycle of if you would do this and if you and if you and if you, as long as you're caught up in that cycle and that habit, you're taking the blame and you're handing it off to the person that you're fighting with. You're handing it off to somebody else. But until you understand what James is talking about, what he's going to share with us here, this is really all you know. This is how you were raised. She's not making me happy, I'm going to be unhappy. This is not going my way, I'm going to be sad. This is how we're raised. This is how we view things. This is how we see things. And until we understand this concept that James is going to talk about today, this is how we act. And conflict at home, listen, this is the truth. Conflict at home is almost always the source of our greatest stress and our greatest anxiety. Did you know that? Conflict at home. I can have conflict at work, and if I go home and I have a peaceful, healthy environment, I can leave it at work. I can go home and tell my wife, man, this is hard. She can say, well, honey, let's talk about it. Are we going to be okay? How can I help you? That sounds a little foreign to our families today, right? Because if I come home with stress, I'm going to stress everybody else out. But what if I came home with an understanding that James is going to teach on today? What if I came home and I had peace in my home? I had a refuge to come to. It is family stress that stresses us the most. It's family conflict that stresses us the most, makes us the most anxious. And we blame others. This is what we do. We blame others. And blaming others never accomplishes anything. Every time I blame, I give away my happiness. And part of refusing to do that, and part of learning how not to do that, is what James explains to us in this passage today. And this is really important. This is really important. If all the things we've talked about in the last months can boil down to something that I want you to take home today, it is this. Because this can change everything about your family. And you're probably going to push back, and you're probably going to struggle to like what I'm saying, but it's not me saying it. You need to understand. I'm not that smart. If so, my family would have never have fought, and we would have never had quarrels, and we've had some doozies. So again, James 4:1 starts with saying, what causes fights and quarrels among you? We think lots of things, him, she, they, that attitude, that behavior. And James says, no, it's not that. That's why we can't fix it, because we attach the source of our anger and our frustration and our fighting, we attach it to the wrong thing. And James is saying, I want you to attach it to the right thing. You don't understand the source. I'm going to help you understand the source, says James. And listen, as I preach today, I want to give those of you who were raised in church a strong warning. Because some of you were raised, you've been in church many years. Some of you, this is new to you. You're going to have an easier time today. Those of you raised in church don't really like what I'm going to say today. You'll just kind of tune it out. That's what us church people can do. We've learned just to sit there and have messages that are life-changing and not get a thing. Just tune them out. Go somewhere else in our mind. I'm asking you today, if you're a long-time church person, listen closely. Listen closely. Then he goes on to say, don't they come from your desires that battle within you? No, I don't think so. No, I don't know. Let me think about, no, it's not me. It's them. It's they. And he says, don't they come from your desires that battle within you? That's not me. It's them. But James is saying, no, it always begins with something inside of you. It always begins with something inside of you. No, they started it. No, it always begins with something inside of you. Now, if we were to stop right here, if we were to just stop this message and we were to have the courage to own this simple idea, to grab hold of it and to own it, it would change your family. It would change your family dynamic. It would change how you talk to each other. It would even change how you think of each other. Because if you took the blame for all the things you blame others, It's so powerful and it's so life-changing. You would have to be changed. And you know what? Your family would function in a way that it's probably never functioned before. The way God intends for family to function. So he continues. He continues. Verse 2. You desire, but you do not have. You desire, but you do not have. Every time there's a conflict, now you're going to push back. You're going to argue in your brain, but I'm going to convince you in a minute. Every time there's a conflict, you want something. Otherwise, you wouldn't be mad. It wouldn't bother you. I don't want anything. She's just acting badly. Well, then you want her to act better. I don't want anything. He's just making a decision that's going to ruin himself. Then you have expectations of him that you want something. There's always something you want attached to your anger and your frustration. Yeah, but it's something I deserve. It's something she said she would do it. He promised he would do it, and I deserve it. Now, I want you to give me a minute. We're going to come back to that in just a minute. These expectations. She said, he said he would. He made a promise. This is what every husband should do. Come on. Every time there's a conflict, there's something that you want that you don't have and are not getting. You desire, but you do not have. This is what he says next. So you kill. Now, I know. We're going, well, wait a minute. This is where I'm off because I've never killed anyone. Or very few. Very few. And see, James is writing, he's writing to a church. He's not writing into a prison camp or a prison. He's not writing to a gang of violent people. He's writing to a church. So this phrase is hyperbole. This phrase is representing, and he wants to paint a picture for you. He wants to show you how powerful what this does, how powerful it is in the lives of people. He says, so you kill. There's something you want, and you're not getting it. You want it so badly. There's something that you want so badly that you're willing to hurt the people that you care about the most in order to get what you want. So you kill. You kill the relationship. You kill their heart. You kill their dream. You kill them. You kill their desires. You kill their personality. You kill them because in that moment, what you want is more important than the health of that relationship. What you want is more important than maybe something they're confused about, and they really do have something that needs to be adjusted in them. But you want it so badly, you're willing to wound them and kill that relationship for what you want. Some parents have killed their relationship with their kids. And I mean killed their relationship with their kids because they wanted something so badly. And their kids couldn't adjust for that. They couldn't adjust for it. Sometimes the expectations we have as parents for our kids are so different than the way they're wired. They'll never be able to please us, ever. And listen, can I just tell you, I'm qualified to talk about this. I have 3 sons and a daughter, and they're all completely different. I mean, they're just wired different. And I have one that says, I kind of want to do this. And I've actually said, you want to do what? I want to do this. Why? I mean, how? Selfish side of me, right? Why do you want to do that? Like they need to explain to me because they need to explain their desires to me. They're different from me. And I could go into detail here, but I got 2 in the room, so I'm not. But they say, I want to do this. And I go, but why? And lately, as I've been saying, but why, I hear a little voice saying, really? How many times did your dad say that to you? Well, that makes no sense. How helpful was that? Even if it was something that maybe it's not the best thing. How helpful is it? But I don't get that. Well, Dad, maybe it's because you're not me. Some kids have left home much younger, much earlier than they should have because they've been squished and pushed down, and their dreams have been pushed, and their personality has been pushed down so much. I knew a young lady in a church I served in one time. I was there for a good long time. This young lady had a personality that was very different. The mother wanted girls who were kind of girlish, feminine and soft. And she had one of her daughters was just feminine and soft, but the other one was a tomboy. I mean, climbing trees, outrunning boys, beating boys up. She was tough, this girl. And it took a lot of years before Mom could realize, wait a minute, she's never going to be what I think she should be. I got to give in. I got to help this kid become. We've seen men so verbally beat down women that they just stole all of their all of their heart, all of their confidence. I've seen women so verbally beat down men, they just emasculate them. And we tend to think men have all the power with their words. No, words are powerful. Words are powerful. And a wife who's supposed to love me and feel like make me feel like I'm the man, can undo me, can undo you, and leave you wanting to just leave and never come back. And this is the power of our words. And we blame others and say, it's your fault, and it's because you said this, and it's because you did this. You gave me that look again, and we put our happiness in their hands, and it needs to stop. And James addresses it because he loves the church. He loves the body of Christ. He loves the followers of Christ, and he wants them to function in a way that they were designed to function in. And our culture functions like this, and we function like this, just like the culture. And James is saying the consequences of that, well, look at the culture and see what the consequences are. That's why you're suffering the same consequences. This is why you can't get along. This is why you quarrel. And when you want something bad enough, you can destroy another person with your words and your attitude and your spirit. And here's how we defend it. We say, parents especially, but I just want the best for them. She's got so much more potential. He just got to wipe that look off his face. That's never going to work. And we just want the best for them. And you know what? We lie to ourselves. We want what we want. We want them to be the lawyer. We want them to at least, have a real job. A writer? That's not a job. Artist? Really seriously? Go get a job. And we want our kids to be certain things, and they have dreams. And we can squish them, and we can wound them. And dads, listen. Nobody has more authority and power here than the words of a father. We build our children up, or we tear them down with our words. And even when a child throws out a dream that just sounds honestly just plain quirky to you, they throw out a dream. They're 14, they're 17, they're 12, they're 21, and they throw out a dream, and in your brain goes, what are you doing? You got to just buck up, and you got to be willing to look and say, you know what, I'll be praying with you about that. What do you really think, Dad? Well, I'm not sure if that would, but you know what? I'm not you, and I'm not God, so I'll pray with you about that. We'll just ask God if that's for you. You know what that does for a kid? Suddenly he can relax and go, wow, if we're going to pray about it, then God will help me know if that's for me or not. The pressure's off. The pressure's off. Moms, your words are powerful. You know that. You're the ones that give our children the most words. That's the reason your words don't seem to carry as much fire, because so many of them go into our kids' ears. You're there. Our words as fathers are less many, but more powerful. They really are. And we lie to ourselves. And this is where some of you are right now, with someone in your family. There's conflict. The relationship has been broken or killed. And that's why we're here today. You know why you hurt the people closest to you the most? Because they're close to you. We hurt the people we're closest to the most because they're close to you. And you want something from them. And if you want it bad enough, you have the potential to destroy them. And the whole time you're saying, it's them, it's them, it's them, it's them, it's them, it's he, it's her. James is saying, no, it's not. It's you, it's you, it's you. And I know, even as I've been speaking, you've thought of some circumstances that just don't apply here. And you're wrong. According to James, you're wrong. You want something. Can you imagine what would happen if in our homes we just owned this idea? Each of us owned this idea. Even if one of us owned it, it might just change everything. He goes on. He says, you covet, but you cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and you fight. And you know what? Some of you have been married a while and you've just gotten used to this and you just let each other off the hook. There's no accountability. You just say, that's the way he is. That's the way she is. This will never change. You'll never be able to change he or her, but you know what? He or her can change he or her. You can change you. Nobody else can. I've found that preaching to the people in my family just doesn't work out as well as preaching to you. You can walk away and say, should I apply that? Maybe I should apply that. But when you preach to your family, they're just hearing so many other voices. They hear things, and they've heard that voice a lot. And it just sounds like demands. And you know what? Here's the problem. They've seen you make mistakes. They're thinking, hey, he's made mistakes. He's not perfect either. Should I listen to him? He goes on, you covet, but you cannot get what you want, so you fight and you quarrel. So James, why do we fight and quarrel? Because you cannot get what you want. Let's all agree on this. If during the conflict we were to pause and realize that part of what I'm feeling right now is because I want something I'm not getting. If we were to do that, if during the conflict, if during the fight, we were to pause, just stop. Maybe even before the conflict started, we were to pause. Just before we walked in to correct the situation, to instruct the situation, we would pause and say, you know what? There's something I want that I'm not getting. If they were to stop before they argued back and just said to themselves, you know what? There's something I want that I'm not getting here. It would change your relationship. That's a game changer. Huge game changer. If everybody in the family would recognize this. If in the middle you would just pause and say, hey, you know what the problem is right now? Can I just tell you what the problem is right now? I'm not getting what I want. Really? Yep, and it's me. And I'm sorry. Wow. Look what just happened. Humility happened. Admission happened. Whoa. Kindness happened. A desire to restore happened. Did Dad just say he was wrong? Somebody bring the news. Report it. Dad just said he was wrong. Mom just said she was wrong. She's never said that before. The kid, the 13-year-old just said he was wrong. Is that even humanly possible? But it happened in this home. Write it down, document it. Let's just practice here for 1 second, okay? We only have a few more minutes left here. I want to practice. I want you to get really good at this, okay? I'm going to say, you know what part of the problem is? You're going to say, I'm not getting what I want. And I want you to say it with it. I want you to put the finger, I'm not getting what I want. We're going to say it together. You ready? All right? You're not supposed to say it to somebody beside you. All right? Just you're going to say it up here. You ready? Here we go. You know what the problem is? I'm not getting what I want. Some of you look really comfortable doing that. And some of you are thinking right now, this is the scary part. You're thinking, if only my husband was here to hear this message right now. If only my wife was here right now. If only my junior high school kid was here right now. And that is the problem. That is the problem. You're missing the point. You're missing the point. Don't miss the point. This is about you. You may never be able to change he or her or they or them, ever. You can change you. And you may be the only one that brings peace into the situation. My goodness, all it takes is one. All it takes is one. You may be the only one that can stop and think rationally enough because you did this differently. You stopped and you paused and you prayed, and you may be the only one as a 13-year-old. I've seen it. 17-year-old, 48-year-old, 73. You may be the only one to stop and bring, but if you're the only one, thank God you're there. Be the one. Objection. Objection, 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 objection. You act like you know, but you don't know what he's like. He's mean. You don't know. You haven't heard her. You haven't heard her go off. If she went off on you, you wouldn't stand there and be happy about it. You'd want to leave. They said they would do it, and they didn't do it. He promised he would, and he didn't. You want something you're not getting. I want you to keep your promise, and you're not. And that's what I want, and you're not doing it. That's why I'm not happy right now. And I'm not getting what I want. But it's not fair. It's not fair. I am nice to him. I do the things I say. I am punctual. I'm careful how I spend. My goodness, look, these were Goodwill shoes. And he just goes out, and it's not fair. It's not fair. And can I just say to you, it will never be fair. This concept of fair, the concept of fairness is kind of ridiculous in our culture. Fairness went out with the Garden of Eden. It just went out. We don't even know what fair is. Here's a question. You ever driven around the Treasure Coast parking lot at the mall whenever it's in season and it's busy and you can't find a spot, and suddenly, very quickly, and there's 40 people driving around looking for spots. It's the big spot hunt. Happens at the beach and at the mall, and you're hunting for a spot. And you kind of get like a shark, in that moment. And it's not necessarily good. The look on your face, and there's even your car gets a look, you know what I mean? And you're looking for the spot, and you see it, and you dart to the spot, and you get in the spot. And you're looking around, and people have been driving around for 25 minutes, and you've been there for 3 minutes. Have you ever sat and beat on your steering wheel and said, it's not fair, it's not fair, they're still driving around and I got a spot, it's just not fair. No, you know what you do? You go, thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord, for the spot. You saw me in my great need, gave me a spot. Our concept of fair is kind of skewed, isn't it? It's skewed to how we see things. It's skewed to what we need in the moment. And fair, just throw fair out. Fair is not going to get you anywhere. Nothing's fair. No matter what the circumstances are, it still boils down to this. I want something from him. I want something from her. I want something that I'm not getting right now. And James continues. This is good. He kind of expands this. He says, you do not have, and this is interesting now, the way he's coming to this. You do not have because you do not ask God. This is huge. This is huge. You don't have because you don't ask God. Wait a minute. If I'm all that selfish, why should I even, if you're saying I'm just a selfish man, I'm a selfish woman, why should I ask God? Because some of the things you want are good things. Some of the things you want are reasonable things. Some of the things you want make sense. The fact is you still want them, and it makes you demanding, and it makes you get angry, and that's got to stop. But some of the things you want do make sense, and they're reasonable, and they should be brought to, but who do you take them to? And he's saying you don't have what you want because you don't ask God. Did it ever occur to you that before you fire off that note and stick it on the mirror in the morning with the frowny face and say, when you wake up, I hope this makes you have a good day? Do you ever stop and think for a minute that you should say a prayer? Some of you have done this. Yeah, I've never. Have you ever stopped just for? Has it ever occurred to you to just stop and maybe get on your knees, or maybe just sit down and just take this to the Lord, to take this to God? Has it ever thought about? Did it ever occur to you? Because if that becomes the way you do things, it changes everything. I'm a person, it doesn't take a whole lot of prayer for my attitude to be readjusted. This doesn't. I don't have to go out for 3 hours before the Lord. I just have to say, God, I'm sorry. Help me. Can I fix this? Goodness gracious. The problem with being Rick is that I have to do this a lot. I have to apologize and make things right. But I find if you're willing to humble yourself and apologize, two things happen. The person you're apologizing to learns from your demonstration of humility and admission. The children that are around the corner listening, because they always are, no matter what age they are learning from your demonstration of humility and admission. And your relationship now has an open door to be restored. And the more you do that, the more the people around you will learn from that and demonstrate that. And your life changes. Why? Because your home changes. This is about family. Before you do any of that, before you launch into the conversation, we need to talk now. And that ought to be a big sign to you, big gauge. No, go pray, go pray. I'm going to deal with this right. You should go pray. To get on your knees and to say, God, I want him to make more money. We're barely making it. You say, God, would you please open her eyes so she won't date that idiot? God, I know you created that idiot, but God, maybe you weren't paying attention or because he ain't right, this kid. Take it to God. Listen, he's saying here, you don't have because you don't ask God. This is so powerful. When you do this, when you ask God first, it gives God an opportunity to change you, to work in you, to readjust your perspective and your thinking. And even give you words that you can still go address it, but now the words are different. The look is different. There's no attack going on. There's no veins in the neck. Now it's just a calm question and encouragement. Wow. Because what you think needs to change in someone else may just need to change in you. James continues. He writes in verse 3, when you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives that you may spend with your own pleasures. I've always read that when I was younger, pleasures, like, fun. Pleasures, fun, surfing, boating, pleasures, fun, watching a good movie, pleasures. That's not what he's saying, things that please you. You want what you want because you want what you want. You want what pleases you. You want what you want from him because you want it to be pleasing to you. You want to be happy. That'll make me happy. He's saying you want it because it's selfish. Your desires are selfish. Your motives are selfish. Have you considered your motives before you enter in a conversation or discussion? Have you considered your motives? James is saying here, Jesus followers, church people, Christians, have you taken this to God? Have you allowed God to work in this situation rather than you work in this situation? Have you allowed God to work in you rather than you work in this situation? And can you take no for an answer from God? Or maybe not now for an answer? God, change her. And could you take, it's coming. You be the example and give it time. Can you trust God for what you think needs to happen? Can you consider that maybe your opinion is not the best opinion? I know that's shocking for some of you. Difficult for me. And can you let it go? Now here's the question I want to end with today. Here's the question I want you to ask yourself. Who in your family is suffering, is struggling, is wounded, is pushed out, is disenfranchised, is alienated? Who in your family, because you're not getting your way? It didn't happen the way you thought it should happen. Who in your family feels alienated because you're not getting your way? Who in your family is suffering because you need to be right? Because you are right. Because doggone it, I'm the mom. I brought you in this world. It's the Bill Cosby thing. I brought you in the world. I can take you out of the world. Will you own the fact that this may well have more to do with you than it does with the other person? And what could you say today? What could you say today through a letter or a phone call or an email or a lunch appointment to begin to take the necessary steps to erase the inappropriate and unnecessary pressure that you put on a family member? Do you know why you quarrel and fight in your family? Because there's something you want and you're not getting it. You know why they quarrel and fight back? Because there's something they want and they're not getting it. And where does it stop? With the one person who's willing to own it. Say, all right, I'm stopping this. I'm going to get away and I'm going to pray. I'm going to ask God for some kind of healing that I can't bring, and even for words that I don't even know what to say. Because there's something you want, you're not getting it. You know, in an ideal world, in an ideal family, it's a family that's seeking to know God and desires to walk in the truth that we find in Scripture. In that kind of a family, in a whole family, in a healthy family, there's always a pause before the conflict. There's always a pause before the fight and the quarrel. There's always a pause. Someone pauses and prays and thinks. I think sometimes we don't even pray. We just pause, and it gives our minds enough room for God to speak. Don't say that. Say this. There's a time for me and God to have a moment that can change me enough that I can change the environment. Goodness gracious, I so hope you just won't go home and just... We're too far gone. You haven't seen what happens. We're too far gone. You're never too far gone. You're never too far gone. God can take you from any place and restore sanity to you and sanity to your family, but it begins with whoever's hearing this today. God, do in me what you need to do in me before I try to squeeze out of other people something that they don't have to give me. They're not able to give me, whether it's their pride or their inability just to think about it, or maybe they're just not wired that way. Do you know why you quarrel and fight in your family? Because you want something that you're not getting. Maybe for some of us today, this can begin a brand new habit. Did you know new thoughts start with a single thought? New behavior starts with a single action. A whole new way of doing things starts in a moment where you say, I'm going to stop this. Wars are stopped because somebody stopped for a moment and said, we've got to stop this. And your family can turn if you decide. That much better if somebody else besides you decides to. But it's on you this morning. Oh, don't leave here saying if you would have just listened to that. God strike you with the inability to speak if that comes to your mind. No words. You know what the problem is today? We want what we want and we're not getting it. And there's only one source, and that is our Heavenly Father. Can I lead you in prayer today? I'd like to pray with you real quick. God, I just thank you that you hear our prayers, you hear our cries, you hear our desires, you see us according to the Scripture, you see things. And I know, Lord, our very highly intelligent culture would say that's silly, that's myth. But those of us who have seen your power on the earth and in our lives would argue. And God, I pray today that everyone hearing this truth would let it plant in their lives. They would plant it in their lives. They would apply it to their lives. They would insist on themselves, whether they're 10 years old or 80 years old, they would, and everyone in between, they would insist on themselves. I can no longer give my happiness to somebody else. I will be kind, regardless of what's said to me. I will be forgiving, regardless of what's said to me. I will be the source of sanity and sense in my home. It will begin with me. And if no one ever links on to this, I'm going to get so good at this that I am a peacemaker and I am a resolver of conflict in the way only God can resolve. And I just pray that for everybody here. I really do ask you, God, to move in the lives of the people in this room so that we can become what our culture looks to and says, that right there, wow, that is a family. That right there, that is a marriage. That single guy right there, he is so kind to his parents. He's so kind to his friends. That single woman, she just walks with this peace and confidence She seems to bring direction into the moment. I pray that for everyone in this room today. Thank you that we can ask you for such things. And I pray this today in Christ's name.